Gimmick puppets have had one of the most toxic competitive careers, I think, in Yu-Gi-Oh history. I don't think there's been an entire archetype based around FTKing the opponent as its main gimmick. Like, I can't think of a deck that does this other than Gem Knights, but Gem Knights don't do it this well and this consistently. Last year around early July, I had to stop playing the game to go do some work related stuff, so I kind of bowed out from the game for like a month or two, and in that time was Nationals, right? So the day before Nationals, Infinite Forbidden came out, and guess what was in Infinite Forbidden? All these new Gimmick Puppet cards that were all like really low rarity, like super rare and common, that essentially created one card FTKs that were in some ways invulnerable to certain hand traps besides Shifter and Bestials, and really made it difficult for you to play around or to prepare for this matchup, especially with cards like Condolence Puppet to make them even more invulnerable to certain hand traps. So you could easily get sacked by a deck like this if you were going to Nationals and you know, were trying to play like at the highest competitive level. There's a chance that you couldn't because you got sacked by Gimmick Puppet, and that kind of is part of the reason why this deck got hit so early. They hit the strings and the dark strings both to 1 as a way to stop the dark string loops. By hitting these both to 1, it still allows the deck to do what it needs to do, but it can't do as much damage with a small number of cards. Usually it's going to take you activating something or doing something more to get the same amount of damage that you would have if you had more copies of these. Recognizing that this deck's flaws post hit, I feel like OCG Konami crafted up a new card for the deck that allowed the deck to extend and to get better at doing what it needed to do, but also not in a way that would make it immediately obvious how to turn this into a FTK. Like, this new card is interesting and it has a lot of utility to it, but it's still not the perfect like one card FTK like Field Spell is, or it's not as strong as Little Soldiers or Rouge Doll, but it does have its uses. And Master Duel has had this card for a while, and Gimmick Puppets, to my knowledge, I have not heard a lot of people complain about Gimmick Puppets in Master Duel. So when this card came out in TCG and Maze of the Master, I was a little curious as to how this card could influence Gimmick Puppets as a deck, and if this card meant, at least for the TCG, that Gimmick Puppets could get their gimmick back, so to say. Just to revisit what is absolutely still possible, I want to show you guys the original Gimmick Puppet FTK, which utilizes Field Spell, Little Soldiers, and Rouge Doll. So you Little Soldiers drop Rouge Doll. When it's sent to grave, it adds itself back to hand. Rouge Doll can reveal any Gimmick Puppet Exceed and then summon itself and a monster and a Gimmick Puppet monster from deck with the same level as that monster's rank. You go into Machinax. Machinax allows you to detach 1. You add a rank up magic from deck to hand, and you get an extra normal summon of a machine type monster. So Argent Chaos Force can target a rank 5 or higher Exceed, summon a C Exceed or number C that's 1 rank higher. Machinax on summon allows you to add a puppet trap from your deck to your hand. You really don't need to. This is completely unnecessary if you're opening Field Spell, but you know, in case your opponent has something and basically they survive the turn, then you have an interruption for them. So Cattle Screen can detach 1 from a Exceed material, takes the damage of the monster with the highest original attack among the destroyed monsters, and then you draw a card. And we get to trigger Machinax Chainlink 2. When you special summon a Gimmick Puppet Exceed monster, you summon this card from your graveyard to either your field or your opponent's field, whichever is more convenient for you. And then you get to add a rank up magic spell from graveyard to hand. Even though Argent Chaos Force can only recycle itself once per turn, it is not a hard once per turn for activation. So as long as we can add it back to hand still, we can activate it again thanks to Machinax. So that's going to be our first 3100, right? Because strings inflicts full damage equal to the attack point. Machinax is going to give them 3100. We're going to link 2 into the Chimera Doll using our 2 Exceed monsters, and Chimera Doll has an ignition effect where it locks you into Gimmick Puppet Exceeds for the rest of the turn, but you take a Gimmick Puppet from your deck, either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard, and then if all monsters you control are Gimmick Puppets, you can special summon a Gimmick Puppet monster from your hand. It doesn't have to be the one that you searched, but sometimes this effect is good, sometimes you don't need it. So in this situation, since Scissor Arms is only on normal summon, we don't need the extra special summon off Chimera Doll. We're going to just extra normal summon our Scissor Arms. Thanks to Machinex earlier in the turn, it gave us the extra normal summon. And we're going to mill the Drury Doll. Drury Doll can banish one to special summon herself. And then we can use Little Soldiers to make Scissor Arms level 8. Then we can go into the DB Grinder. Before we do anything else, we can use the Field Spell effect to detach one to special summon any monster from our graveyard to the opponent's side of the field. So this is going to allow us to summon C40 to the opponent's side of the field. And that also allows us... Now, C40 is a mandatory effect, so try not to leave something with a string counter on field, because you will take the damage if you do, so just be careful about that. That's why we put this Cattle Scream on their field without a string counter, because that would have given us 2,000 damage, which would have completely counteracted the point. So DB Grinder can, up to twice per turn, detach one to pop a monster your opponent controls, a special summon monster, and then if it's an Exceed monster, you inflict damage equal to its original attack. So essentially you get to pop the C40 that you put on their field, inflict 3,300, and then you can go into Argent Chaos Force to slap C15 on top of regular 15, and now you get to go for Giant Hunter, which can just pop a monster your opponent controls and inflict damage, whether it's an Exceed monster or not. And that's the last bit of damage that we need for this to be an FTK. This is still fully possible because I only used 140, 1C40. Everything else is still fully legal. So now I want to explore, what do you need to potentially go for game if you aren't opening Field Spell? So I wanted to explore what we can do with our Rouge Doll plus Fiendish Knight, right? Because Fiendish Knight is going to open you up to more lines than what you had before. So Rouge Doll can reveal Gigante's Doll, right, which is your rank 4, to summon itself and to summon Little Soldiers from deck, which allows you to activate Little Soldiers to mill Cattle Scream to make himself level 8. This isn't as strong as opening Little Soldiers and normal summoning it, but it gets you, or close to what you can do with just Little Soldiers, but it gives you a way to do it without using your normal summon. So now we're still going to go into Machinex. And Machinex is going to be your bread and butter. It's always going to be your first overlay. We're going to instantly activate our Chaos Force to make big Machinex. As you can see, as I said, we don't really need the trap cards anymore. You can still play them if you want, but they're not necessary. Then we're going to use Cattle Scream to detach one to special summon itself. Then we're going to use Fiendish Knight, right? So this is why detaching was important, because Fiendish Knight special summons itself and a Gimmick Puppet monster in your graveyard, or a monster from your opponent's graveyard. But because this is assuming that we're turn 1, assuming that we're trying to replicate the FTK of the Field Spell, we're trying to get the most amount of gas that we can for ourselves first. So using this turn 1, you're going to summon a Gimmick Puppet from your own graveyard and itself from the hand, all in one effect. You can use the 2 level 8s to make your strings, and you can use your Machina to summon to the opponent's side of the field and add back your Argent Chaos Force. So 40 is going to place some string counters on a few different monsters. And because you detached Rouge Doll, this is the first time Rouge Doll is being sent to graveyard, so it gets to add itself back to hand, which this is actually going to come up. Now we're immediately going to link into our Chimera Doll. Now you would have thought like, oh, well, why didn't we go into C40 first? Well, because of the way that this was sequenced, if we went to C40, every other monster on the field would have been destroyed. Because we want to C40 pop our own Machinex, but we also want to be able to link summon after. So for us to make the C40, Fiendish Knight would have had to been able to stay on the field, but there's no way for Fiendish Knight to be able to stay on the field when Fiendish Knight is necessary to make the 40 to begin with. We have to sequence it this way so that we're able to still get the string counters, but we're also not stopping our link play, because the link play is one of the most important. So now, because Fiendish Knight was sent to the graveyard, it also gets to special summon itself from the hand. So now we're going to use Machinex to detach one to special summon a monster to our opponent's side. So now we're going to put the OG strings to the opponent's side of the field. Now we're going to go Chimera Doll to add a card to the hand, and then special summon a Gimmick Puppet from our hand. Rouge Doll would not have had another way to have been summoned from our hand, so it's pretty good that we can get it on field again. And then we're going to use our first normal summon of the turn to make Fiendish Knight. And then we're going to use our second normal summon of the turn to make Terror Baby. So Terror Baby gets to revive a level 8 monster. So we're going to go into the DB Grinder here. So DB Grinder gets to pop 1, inflict 3k, pop 2, inflict 15. And then we're going to go Chaos Force to go C40. C40 is going to pop our own Machinex and inflict 3100, and now they're at 400 left. So we're gonna use Little Soldiers to turn both our level 4s into level 8s, overlay into another DB Grinder, and then Chaos Force gets to come back, and Chaos Force instant overlay into Machinex. Now, what you're gonna notice here is no, they are not at 0 life points. No, you do not get to instantly go for game just because you opened Rouge Doll plus Fiendish Knight. Now, what you will notice here is that they are at 400 life points. And because they're at 400, if you use Machinex's effect, that when they special summon a monster, you can destroy that monster and inflict damage equal to half its original attack. If you're able to resolve that, you basically have a checkmate scenario against the opponent, to where you haven't gamed them directly, but you have enough to stop them on their turn from being able to play the game. I know it's just one interruption, which makes it very vulnerable to something like a drawing imperm for turn, but it's also better than nothing. If you don't draw a field spell, oftentimes you're not going for game unless you have a crazy amount of extenders. But with just this new card, we're able to at least put so much pressure on the opponent to play their turn absolutely correctly. If they do something other than normal summon a monster into Typhon, they might just lose the game. And that's the crazy thing, is that we have a lot of gas here to be able to keep playing if they're not able to out our entire board. So putting your opponent into a checkmate scenario is an alternative way of almost getting you there, but not exactly getting a hole in one. So I have another situation with Little Soldiers plus Fiendish Knight. Now Little Soldiers is going to get a Bloody Doll, right? And this is just going to be similar to our field spell combo, with Rouge Doll being here and Cattle Scream being here and being able to make Machinex. And so we're going to go Chaos Force, slap Machinex here, and Cattle Scream can bring itself back. Go for regular 40, Chaos Force gets to come back, 40 is going to detach, target Machinex. Now we get to go for Fiendish Knight, right? This one's a little safer because now we can just still go into Chimera Doll first, but your Cattle Scream is completely okay from being popped off of C40 if you wanted to go for C40 there. So Fiendish Knight is going to be able to add itself back to hand since it was sent to graveyard. And then Machinex gets to slap regular 40 on the opponent's field. Chimera Doll is going to add 1, and then special summon out the Fiendish Knight. And then thanks to our Machinex effect, we get the extra normal summon of Scissor Arms, who's going to mill Jury Doll. Little Soldiers is going to be able to make ourselves into 2 level 8s, and we get to go DB Grinder. We're going to go Chaos Force on the DB Grinder to make an instant overlay into C40. We're not going to pop the strings yet. Machinex is going to summon itself to its opponent's field, add us back Chaos Force. We're going to give them 3,100 points of damage for popping our own Machinex. And we did draw into field spell, but we're going to pretend that we didn't because this would instantly give us game. But then we're going to go into Jury Doll, overlay into DB Grinder, pop for 15, DB Grinder pop for 3,000, and then we're going to give them Machinex, and we're back in the same scenario, right? So essentially, Little Soldiers or Rouge Doll plus Fiendish Knight puts them in a scenario where they're very limited in what they can do in terms of being able to play through our FTK. So that's why these cards are pretty strong at being good extenders. This is a little healthier than Gimmick Puppets just being able to go straight for game. And I like the idea of this, where it's like, okay, if you don't open enough to stop me on my turn, you're gonna need something that beats just the Machina, the Machinex, and if you can, then maybe you have a chance of taking the game state back, but if you can't, then Machinex may be too strong. Now that we've explored the potential of Little Soldiers plus Fiendish Knight to put your opponent into checkmate scenarios, what you found in both scenarios is that they had about 400 life points left, meaning that you could play anything from Tremendous Fire to Ukazi to your average burn cards will put you over that hump and turn your checkmate scenarios into an FTK. It's a little weird that Gimmick Puppet has to resort to doing that to be able to FTK without field spell, but I feel like it's a fair trade-off. Like, they trade a little consistency for some cards to guarantee that they get to go for game versus being able to go for game basically off of just one card that makes them invulnerable, or being able just to go for game off of like any of their engine cards, which I feel like this is the preferable way that we would want Gimmick Puppet to exist in a healthy format. Even though Gimmick Puppet itself is still kind of a toxic strategy, I feel like this balances it out. I figured, okay, what are the best ways I can think of to utilize the fact that Gimmick Puppet is plus or minus 400 life points when trying to go for game? Well, what I came up with, so starting off the same way, Cattle Scream, Rouge Doll, Machinex, Chaos Force, Machinex again, or CXE Machinex, Cattle Scream, Strings, Machinex on opponent's field, C40 for both monsters, Fiendish Knight for Rouge Doll, link 2 into Chimera, Fiendish Knight add itself back to hand, Machinex pop string on the opponent's field, and then Chimera Doll is going to be able to add the Terror Baby, and then special summon out the Fiendish Knight. Terror Baby's going to be able to normal summon it to, thanks to Machinex, and it gets us into Cattle Scream. Use a tool base to go DB Grinder, pop 1, DB Grinder pop 2. Then we're gonna Chaos Force to go into C40 to pop our Machinex, inflict 3100. And look, we're at a 400 deficit, just like we were at before. And Little Soldiers is gonna give our 2 level 4s level boost so we can go into Machinex. Chaos Force is going to be able to trigger since we didn't use this effect this turn yet. And we're going to use this effect to go for Giant Hunter. And then we're going to resolve Dipsy Fiend, right? So if you're paying attention, or if you remember, Dark Strings does draw you a card. So Dipsy Fiend, what it does is you discard a card, and then you declare an attribute, and you summon this card to your opponent's field with that attribute. Now, what makes this so interesting is that you have multiple ways. Like, for example, if you wanted to summon this while you controlled Machinex, this would also be able to go for game while you control Machinex. So you don't need to use Giant Hunter. You can summon this to your opponent's field while you control Machinex, and then Machinex would be able to destroy this and give your opponent 750 points of damage, which will put them over the hump of that 400. Or you can use it now after you summon Giant Hunter, summon itself to the opponent's field, Giant Hunter, pop for 15. Which is cool, right? I think that's a really fun way to take advantage of the fact that you can just slap a monster on the opponent's field. Again, cards like Tremendous Fire, cards like Ukazi may also cover this same niche and be able to do the same thing. Unfortunately, this doesn't do anything for your engine because we don't play any Fiend monsters, but I just thought that it was just a funny way to utilize a different approach to our FTK. Next, I want to explore a card that's a little more out there. There is a way to search this card off of a card called Exceed Force, which I will show you guys once we get to the deck profile. But I wanted to show you guys another way that you can utilize not just the burn FTK, but an alternative win condition. So we go Little Soldiers, Rouge Doll add itself back to hand, Rouge Doll reveal Machinex, summon Cattle Scream, summon itself. Overlay to Machinex. Machinex grabs Chaos. Chaos goes into Sea Exceed. Cattle Scream, summon itself back out. Go into regular 40. Summon out Machinex to your field this time. Add the Chaos Force back to hand. 40's gonna play string counters on both. link into Chimera Doll. Chimera Doll is going to add Scissor Arms. Machinax is going to use this effect to place OG 40 on the opponent's field. So now we're going to normal summon OG Scissor Arms. Scissor Arms is going to mill the Fiendish Knight, and Fiendish Knight, much like Rouge Doll, adds itself back to hand. Fiendish Knight's going to summon itself at the Machinax. We're going to use our Chaos Force here to get a instant overlay into C40. Little Soldier is going to turn our 2 level 4s into level 8s. We're going to go into DB Grinder. On summon, we get the Argent Chaos Force to add itself back to hand. So DB Grinder pop 1, inflict 3k. And this time we're going to go for Exceed Shift, right? So what Exceed Shift does is that it tributes Exceed monster, and it summons from your extra deck another Exceed monster, the same type, attribute, and rank as the attributed monster has, and then it attaches itself to that Exceed monster. Exceed monster is sent to the graveyard during the end phase. So we go for the OG Gimmick Puppet of Leo, and the reason why this is great because Leo can then detach one to place a Destiny counter on it. Now this doesn't actually do anything because it needs 3 Destiny counters for you to win the duel. So that is why you instead just instant overlay after you detach that first material to go into C88 Gimmick Puppet Disaster Leo. And this is how you go for game. This is the only Gimmick Puppet Exceed that cannot be overlaid using a different Gimmick Puppet monster. When you're going for C40, you don't have to use regular 40. When you're going for C15, you don't have to use regular 15. When you're going for C Exceed Machinax, you don't have to use regular Machinax with Chaos Force. This is the only Gimmick Puppet Exceed where you have to use the OG Leo to summon this guy. What he does is neither player can target him with card effects, and once per turn he can detach one to inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. And then what he does is that during the end phase, if your opponent's life points are 2,000 or less and this card has no materials, you win the duel. So we didn't even need the detach in that scenario, but there are times where I played this line without Exceed Shift. They were at 3,900 instead of 19, and so it's hard to get that extra damage in there. I was able to play this line before. The issue is that he needs to have no Exceed materials left. So essentially, you need to be able to get Gimmick Puppet of Leo on the field with no Exceed materials. That means essentially you need to either summon it before you link summon to be able to get rid of it and summon it back with something like Terror Baby. And there's no way to do that in engine without link summoning. And using this for a link summon is very, very tough to rebuild the board and start getting damage on field. So doing it this way, where we're just using Exceed Shift so that we can get Leo with only 1 material, which it can detach, and then C88 with only 1 material, which it can detach, so that we can get C88's end phase effect to automatically win the duel because it has no materials and our opponent has 2,000 life points or less. The Exceed Shift isn't like Tremendous Fire, it isn't like Dipsy Fiend, and this is why I think it is somewhat difficult to say that Tremendous Fire or Dipsy Fiend is the answer that solves every hand in this deck. But it is an answer to the deck. It's not the answer, it's an answer. With our final combo, I wanted to consider a going second approach to the FTK. And I figured the best way that I can do that, because it's like, okay, what if they have this on the field? What if they have that on the field? Okay, fair enough. If we can play this FTK without using normal summon. And this is very significant because this allows us to play cards like Lava Golem, Sphere Mode to break boards without needing to invest a large amount of deck space into breaking boards. So this will allow us to break certain interruptions on the opponent's field and then just be able to kind of play uninterrupted. Like, as long as our field spell can kind of go unresolved, we'll be all right. So we go field spell to add Fiendish Knight, and again, we're not using normal summon, so we're not gonna add little soldiers, normal summon little soldiers. We're doing this without using normal summon. So what we're doing here instead is we're doing Rouge Doll to reveal the rank 4 Gigantes doll, just like I showed earlier, so that we can still get access to our little soldiers without using normal summon. We're gonna go straight into Machinax, grab Chaos Force. We're gonna use Fiendish Knight, summon itself and Rouge Doll out. Going to use Chaos Force here. Also notice I didn't use Rouge Doll's effect the first time it was sent to graveyard. That's actually really important because you don't want Cattle Scream here. So we're going to use Chaos Force's effect. to go for Machinax. Now we're gonna do Cattle Scream so we can detach the Machinax from the Sea Exceed Machinax. Now we're gonna go for 40. Chaos Force is gonna add us out back. 40 is gonna place string counters. Machinax is gonna summon a Cattle Scream to the opponent's field. And then we're gonna go for our C40. And we're gonna chain our Machinax, and we're gonna give him 3100. Fiendish Knight is gonna be able to come back to hand. Now C40 is gonna place one string counter on the opponent's monster. We're gonna go Chimera Doll. Chimera Doll here is going to mill the Jury Doll. You don't want to add this to hand, it's better off in graveyard, right? And then you get to special summon back the Rouge Doll. Jury Doll is going to be able to summon itself back out, overlay into DB Grinder, and then we're going to use the field spell to place a 3k monster on the opponent's field. DB Grinder is going to inflict 3k, and then we're going to go for our Hunter to go for that last 2000, and that is GG's. Now you noticed that I played a little more recklessly with the C40. I went into C40 despite Fiendish Knight still being on the field, and it's like the field spell is so good you can kind of play a little more recklessly when you're trying to go for game. Just being able to slap any one of your monsters in graveyard on the opponent's field is just really strong for this deck to be able to control how much damage we can output on the opponent. This is even considering that the Lava Golem is on their field. We could have played a second Giant Hunter if we really wanted to, and went for one Giant Hunter first to pop that Lava Golem and inflict 3000. And then, you know, as the combo goes along, maybe then go for C40 later on in the turn. But as long as you can get the 8000, that's all that matters. So in the end, this is what the deck list looks like. An insane commitment to opening field spell and /or opening little soldiers. So the Ray map is for the little soldiers, and we have 8 ways into field spell. This way we have the maximum potential to open either little soldiers plus extender, or we have the 1 card way into field spell. Because field spell is so good, we're willing to play more bricks for it. Unfortunately, I couldn't commit too much space to non-engine just because you need at least 1 Terra Baby for first turn and at least 1 for follow-up. If you go for Machinax again and you go for Chimera Doll again, then you want to have those extra extenders. But otherwise, you don't really need to play more than 1 of any other of the Gimmick puppets because they all kind of have their purpose. This is kind of here to be milled off of Condolence. Same thing with Terra Baby. It's like if you mill one off of the Condolence puppet, you still want to have another one that you're able to search because it also has a really good Condolence puppet. At least we can main deck Dominus Impulse because our whole engine is dark. There's really no conflict with the Impulse and Imperm, just so that we're not playing into talents or thrust as much on the opponent's turn, and we can still stop them from playing the game. This extra deck here, I think it's all self-explanatory. If you really don't like the C88 stuff, then you can just go for an extra Giant Hunter and either an extra Machinax or an extra DB Grinder, whichever one you think is more appropriate. DB Grinder is really useful because you're going to want to make more rank 8s. So if you just want more rank 8s, that's how you can go for it. But I feel like these to add a sophistication to your extra deck that you don't have normally. Now for side options, I know a lot of people played Horus in this deck. I wanted just to do these lines with just engine alone before I really dedicated like slots with like Horus stuff, and I feel like Fiendish Knight makes it okay to play with engine alone. Lava Golem, obviously. Then you have Exceed Force. This is your way to search Exceed Shift. Essentially what this does is that when you have an Exceed monster overlaid on top of another Exceed monster, which you will because of Argent Chaos, right? You overlay one Exceed monster on top of the other. This can take an Exceed card from your deck and either mill it to the graveyard or add it to hand because you've fulfilled the condition of having an Exceed with another Exceed. Then if this stays on the graveyard until turn 3, like if you're not able to game them, then you have a bit of follow-up because this can detach one from any monster on field, especially summon any Exceed monster from your graveyard or banishment. So yeah, Exceed Shift's cool for that. Exceed Gift's also cool because it detaches 2 off of Leo and you draw 2 cards, but I feel like Exceed Shift is the more consistent option, but can also also work. Dipsy Fiend, right? I showed you guys. It's just any monster that can summon itself to the opponent's field without giving you some really stupid repercussions, like Silent Wobby. Your opponent draws a card when you summon Silent Wobby to their field, so I don't want that card to be something that can potentially stop me from going from game. So at least Dipsy Fiend, I can discard one card at any point during my turn to slap this on the opponent's field, and since with C40 I'm drawing a card, I'm kind of not going neg if I drop this on this. The Puppet Trap card if you want to play it, and then lastly we have Spell Card Monster Reborn. I figured if Shifter and Bestials don't get hit on the next list, this may be our best way to play through those interruptions. Like, the deck is really fun, and although I didn't show every single potential line, I felt like I kind of covered most of them. If you need to discover more lines or discover like how to play with this deck properly, what you really just need to do is you kind of need to do some Gimmick Puppet math or some Gimmick math. And the Gimmick math is what's the most amount of damage each of my Exceed monsters can inflict based on the scenario, right? So Machinex by itself can't really inflict that much. Like, maybe before you go for any other Exceed monster, it can inflict maybe like 1,000 at most. By summoning Cattle Scream to the opponent's side of the field and then popping it with its own effect, you can inflict 1,000 at most. Versus if you hold off on using Machinex's effect and then summon something like either Strings to the opponent's field or what may have you, you can get more damage off of summoning that same monster, so you don't need to use Machinex's effect. You can just let your other monsters do the work for you. When it comes to strings, right, I'm placing string counters. I know that Dark Strings, the most I'm going to get is around 3,000, which is fine. I'm perfectly fine with that. When it comes to DB Grinder, I know I can get to 4,500, maybe even upwards to 6,000 if I have Field Spell, but I can get upwards to 4,500 normally by having Machinex on the opponent's field and the strings on the opponent's field. So we know this can go 3,000, we know this can go 4,500, and we know Giant Hunter can go upwards 2,000 to 3,000 because that's how we're going to pop the Cattle Scream. So you just keep in mind the maximum amount of damage you can inflict with a single Exceed monster, and it kind of helps you build those lines a lot better. It's like, oh, like if you mess up a line, it's like, oh, well, I could have gotten some damage right here when I didn't, and instead I opted into another route which didn't get me anywhere, so I didn't really need to take that route. So yeah, I know the deck list isn't perfect, but I figured I've never really messed around with Gimmick Puppets post Infinite Forbidden, and I just wanted to show you guys a little take that I had on it. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. This has been your boy Nistro here, signing out.